The Golden Years.
Hello, this is Jack McDonald, welcoming you once again to the Golden Years. This week, we look back through the golden years to the days of the Red Mountain Railway. In Rossland's new Centennial Museum, an eye-catching display will depict the story of transportation. The main feature of this display will be a topographical model of Rossland and the immediate area. On this model will be shown a railroad that not too many people will remember. It is the Red Mountain Railway that made the steep climb up to Rossland from Northport, Washington, through the Patterson Valley. The Red Mountain Railway was built by D.C. Corbin of Spokane, who had built several railroads in the Pacific Northwest. Corbin had just completed his Spokane Falls and Northern Railroad that ran from Spokane to its northern terminus at Northport. He had also built an extension across the border to Nelson, which he called the Nelson and Fort Shepherd Railway. In 1895, he turned his attention toward tapping some of the lucrative haulage to Rossland. F. Augustus Hance was building his Columbia and Western Railway from Trail Creek Landing to Rossland, and Corbin sought to siphon off some of Hyance's traffic to the Spokane Falls and Northern. Corbin's Red Mountain Railway reached Rossland 6 months after Hyance's road went into operation in 1896. The Red Mountain Line gave Rossland direct rail connection to the bustling city of Spokane. Shortly after completion, the Red Mountain Railway and all of Corbin's holdings were sold to the Great Northern and became part of the Great Northern system. One person who has reason to recall the Red Mountain Railway is Jim Vipond. Jim's father operated a wagon freight line from Rossland to Northport and was put out of business by the arrival of the Iron Horse.
Yes, my father and mother and my 5 oldest brothers and sisters all moved into Rossland from Spokane in 1895. And my father brought up his horses and wagons from Spokane and went into the business of hauling ore from the Leroy and other mines at Rossland to the smelter at Northport, and also for shipment by rail from Northport. On the way back, of course, he would haul back any kind of goods that the stores or people in Rossland might need. This went on for a period of 6 to 8 months until the railroad was built into Rossland, and then, of course, there was no more need for his business in hauling ore and supplies. The usual thing was for 6 and 8 horse teams in the big ore wagons, and in many occasions they would stop overnight at Clark's Camp down in the vicinity of where Patterson is now. And I remember hearing of one incident where almost everybody who stayed at this camp became violently ill. I don't know, they talked about it being typhoid fever, but whether it was typhoid fever or mountain fever, I never really heard. There were quite a few deaths from this plague, and my father was very ill for quite a while too. And eventually they all recovered and got back on the job again. But this was in 1895 and 1896.
The Red Mountain Railway twisted and turned for 18 miles in its climb from Northport to Rossland. The first 9 miles from Northport to Patterson at the international boundary was chartered in the United States as the Columbia and Red Mountain Railway. The second 9 miles from Patterson to Rossland was chartered in Canada as the Red Mountain Railway. Starting at Northport, the railroad crossed the Columbia River to the Colville Indian Reserve on a timber bridge. From there, it wound its way up through the steep gorge of Big Sheep Creek to Patterson. On this section of the line, the passengers were treated to a spectacular view of Sheep Creek Falls as the train crept past high up on the canyon wall. From Patterson, the railway traversed the floor of the valley through what is now King George Park, then rose into a steep climb to the pass that gave it access into Rossland. By means of a circuitous route that crossed and recrossed Little Sheep Creek, the climb culminated in a series of long loopbacks that gained sufficient altitude to bring the railroad into Rossland through the same rock cut that carries the highway from Patterson into the Black Bear area today. Rossland old-timer Archie Coombes lived near Patterson during the days of the Red Mountain Railway and recalls one of his first jobs as a track walker.
Well,
At this time, Patterson was quite a lively spot. The Great Northern Railway was running to Rossland at that time. One freight train, I believe, each day, and a passenger train, a return trip 7 days a week from Marcus to Rossland. A lot of freight was being shipped through Patterson in the way of timber, cedar poles, fence posts, cordwood. And from the American side, a lot of timber came to the Rossland mines.
Did you ever work for the Great Northern, Archie?
Yes, I did, Jack. That was one of my first jobs, actually. I guess I was about 14 years of age, and I got a job on the section gang. 10 hours a day at $1.75 a day. Tamping ties, maintenance on the railroad track. Later I became a fire patrol where I walked 5 miles each way twice a day, which made a distance of 20 miles a day, still for $1.75 a day.
Would this all be on the Canadian side, or would you cross the
Yes,
border?
it was all on the Canadian side. From Patterson, 5 miles north of Patterson. Another fire patrol would walk from Rossland down to the point where I walked to.
This was to look for cinder fires from the locomotives? or-
Yes, the engine would throw sparks and start fires occasionally in the dry weather. That was a bit risky during the hot weather, but during rainstorms, of course, there was no danger of sparks, and I had a rather easy time during that period.
From the Black Bear area, the Red Mountain line ran on a level track around the shoulder of Red Mountain and reached the station after crossing Center Star Gulch on a high timber trestle just behind the present arena. The station was on the site of the present Department of Highways equipment yard. Alongside the station was a small square building with forbidding bars on the windows. This was the immigration building. Monty Graham recalls that his uncle was immigration officer on the Red Mountain Railway, or as it was by then referred to as the Great Northern.
One thing I do remember that was taken up, and a lot of other chaps will not remember, is the Great Northern Railroad. I remember riding from Rossland down to Northport and to Marcus on the railroad. And also I had an uncle that was an immigration officer that used to ride that train every day. He'd ride it from Rossland to Northport and then catch it coming back again. His office with bars on the windows was situated right beside the railroad station, which was always quite a neat-looking little station, the way the GM built their buildings, and the one thing about it, they were green in color, which was something different in those days.
You recall the location of that station, I assume?
The location of that station is actually right where the government, I believe, have their yards at this time, which is just below the BAC grounds, behind the present arena. And the track used to extend over past where the high school now stands, which was at that time a ball grounds.
After the Great Northern took over the Red Mountain Railway, the olive green train that puffed its way up the steep grade was nicknamed the Jim Hill. Many a Rossland family rode the train down to Northport for a day's outing and a picnic, then returned to Rossland on the afternoon train, tired but happy. Warren Crowe remembers the special trains that used to bring investors on noisy excursions from the city of Spokane.
Well, the Red Mountain Railroad, what stands out in my mind more about them, of course, they were built into Rossland. I think Corbin was somewhat responsible for the introduction of the railroad into the Rossland area. Of course, Heights might have been the original instigator of it, but anyway, it was followed by Corbin, who was a railroad man. The possibilities were in existence in Rossland. So what stands out in my mind, not so much I remember we weren't very old at the time that most of the mines that being operated in Roslyn was operated by U.S. capital. A lot of these investors seen the possibility, and they were more than anxious to invest their money. And after the mines were in production, they were arriving at such great profits from their investment, that they were quite numerous in Spokane. They would get and hire a special train consisting of 3 or 4 coaches and load those coaches with people that had money invested in Roslyn to come up there to take a look and see for themselves. And I can recall when these special trains would come in, we'd have an idea that the trains, well, we knew when the regular trains run, and this would be so we'd all be flocked over to the station waiting the arrival of these trains. Goodness, when they come in, us kids were showered with candy and flags, American flags and candy, and all whistles and all kinds of things that these people would bring up. So it used to be quite a heyday for us, and these people would get up, of course, and it wouldn't be long before they'd be mingled with the crowd. Well, the town that supported 32 saloons, you know where that recreation would be, mostly down in the bar. And nevertheless, us kids benefited great by it, but they enjoyed their stay there, you know, and well, I wasn't the talk that would go on. I think there were some of the investors, some of the investors from Texas, and you know what, Texas, they had everything bigger in Texas than we. Not kidding, but we used to look forward to those trains, and they would run several of those trains during the course of the summer.
Remember that big loop trestle on the Great Northern?
Yes, I well remember that, Jack. There was quite a feat. There was a trestle that stood out. It practically, it didn't make the complete circle, but I would say it made from pretty close to 70 or 80% of a complete circle, and that was built by bridgemen. Today we haven't those kind of men. They're not available. At these days, well, of course, blueprints did enter into it, but a man carried an awful lot of knowledge within his head, too.
The plodding old Jim Hill also holds a place in Ike Glover's memories of his boyhood days.
The Great Northern, it went out here at 10 o'clock in the morning and used to come back about 4 o'clock in the evening. To give her an idea just how fast these trains were, why, as kids we used to go down Sheep Creek fishing down towards Patterson, and we generally used to leave home about the time that the train was coming. Well, I wasn't very big then, and there was one spot there where the train used to really get down and puff and snort, and that was above Garnet Andrews Ranch. It is the present day. And we used to wait on the side there now, where the engineer used to slow it down a little more, I don't know, but us kids used to run and jump on the last car there, grab onto the railings of the step on the back coach, climb up on that. And then it got a little further away, it used to pick up speed again and seemed to go ahead much easier. But the conductor and them was good to kids. They'd come out there and kind of throw a bit of a scare into you. Then they'd tell you to come inside and sit down because you might fall off.
The Red Mountain Railway was a money-maker in its early years, but as time went on, the bulk of the traffic gradually swung over to the CPR's Columbia and Western Railway. The sale of the Leroy to British interests and the closing of the Northport smelter deprived the line of the lucrative ore haul to Northport. It is said that Jim Hill did not like the Red Mountain Railway and refused to provide it with proper equipment. In any case, whatever the reason, the line became uneconomic, and in 1922 Rosslanders watched while the rails were removed and part of the grade was transformed into an automobile road. A few artifacts and photos in the Rossland Museum are all that remain today to remind this generation of D.C. Corbin's Red Mountain Railway that for a quarter of a century gave daily service between Rossland and Spokane. And that's our story for this week. Join us again next week for another journey back into Rossland's golden years. Recollections on this week's program were by Rossland old-timers Jimmy Vipond, Archie Coombes, Monty Graham, Warren Crowe, and Ike Glover. Now, this is Jack McDonald speaking on behalf of the Rossland Centennial Committee, inviting you to be with us again next week. We'll see you then.
This program is produced by Radio 610 with the cooperation of the Rossland Centennial Committee and the citizens of the friendly Golden City.